So it now says it is recording. I want to just begin by pointing out some things that I discovered. I don't really look at the examples that closely that are posted for you when it's in a shell. But one of the things I looked at after I started getting some questions from you all was the example that is posted. The example that is posted doesn't have the correct information in it. When you get to task 3, everything is pretty much okay till you get to task 3. But when you get to task 3, they've got them reversed. In other words, they have 3 of the research articles and 5 online tools. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be 5 researched articles and 3 online tools. So you can always have more, but you're supposed to have at least that many. So I want to make sure that it's there just as a possible example of the way it might look. But if you will please follow the directions that Dr. Bullis and I give you and the information I put on the agendas, and make it look more professional than one that just keeps going on top of each other. So if you will do that, I think it'll be a lot better. And then we try to break down and put exactly what's in the rubric. So if you will follow what we put in our notes to you, then you'll get it right. But that is one thing that I really looked at after I got some questions from some of you and saw some of the work that you were turning in. You always turn it in really well done. And so when I started seeing it reversed, I thought, okay, there's got to be something going on. And I think I talked with one of you and you pointed it out. So I went in and checked after that, and it is reversed on that particular one. At this point in time, basically you should have your cover page. You should have your school profile, which will be the next page. You should have task 1 pretty close to finished. You should have task 2 almost finished. And you should have a rough draft of task 3. And as of 5 o'clock this afternoon, I have reviewed all of them that you all have turned in. So I want to make sure that you all are getting my feedback and the peer feedback. One of the other things that I want to make sure that I remind you is I'm not going to count something against you when it is not your fault. If you happen to be paired with someone who is behind in getting their tasks done and you cannot do the peer reviews, I'm not going to count that against you because yours are late. But what we will do is whenever they get them turned in, then you turn one in. And if something happens and we have somebody that drops out later on and you've been reviewing them all the time, then we'll let you have an opportunity to just review somebody else's that's on discussion board so that you won't be minus any of those points. At this point in time, we have had Johnny Harris Lilly to withdraw, and just this week we've had Jakia Wynn to withdraw. So if those 2 people are in your groups, then your groups are down to 4. But I made your groups larger this time. Sometimes we learn from doing things. I made your group larger this time so that in case people did drop out, you should still have enough that you could have people to review and have someone to review yours. Your references and your appendices go at the end of your paper. And as you are doing your references, you will include the references for each section that you're doing, but then when you get ready to put the paper together, you will post all of them together and they will be in alphabetical order and all of that. I understand there is a new APA publication edition. Keep following the 6th edition, because once a semester starts, we're not going to change in the middle of the semester. So just keep using 6 as your reference guide. All right, do you have any questions for me? Let's get your questions out of the way first, if you've got any. Okay, I want to go ahead and introduce task 4 and 5, and so that's a large portion of what I want to do tonight. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen, see if I still have what I want up there. Yes. So when we look at the action plan, what you're doing is you are leading your PLC in developing an action plan, and you're looking at yourself as the leader. You're going to be talking about your collaboration, your shared governance, and your delegated responsibilities. This one is concise, and the information has a presentation that has graphics in it, and that is going to highlight your research, your data analysis, and the outcomes. And after you get it compiled in your PLC, you're going to present it to your school administrators. So this is task 4. Task 4 has 2 parts, and all of you have probably been part of completing a action plan of some sort for your school. So it's the same kind of thing, because in an action plan or any kind of plan that you do for your school, there are certain things that either DPI or the federal government, they tell you what has to be in there, and you have to do what is in there. So in this particular action plan, you're taking the information that you learned in task 1 about how to run a PLC. You're taking your information from the data that you studied in task 2 and 3. You're taking the strategies that you've studied, and you're putting it all together in a plan that you're going to recommend to your school administration to try to use, that's going to help your school improve in whatever need you've identified. Now, these are the pieces. So when you are doing your task 4, the action plan, put prompt 1, and then underneath that, your subheadings are going to be importance of the action plan, and that's going to be research-based information. And then you're going to align it with the student learning outcomes. You're going to have a section on short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals and objectives. You're going to have a section that's got specific activities that you're going to align with those goals and objectives that you have identified. Then how are you going to know it's successful? What's the indicators of success? What are your measurement techniques? How are you going to know in the short period of time that, how are you going to know in a short period of time that you are completing this for this semester, that it's actually having a positive goal? Now, if your end goal is to improve the end of course test or end of grade test, that's a worthy goal, but how do you know in a short period of time whether it's actually working? So that's what we're sort of looking for here, so that you have an idea of how it's working. Then who's going to do what? As you are doing this action plan, who's going to be responsible for the different things that have to be done? Is it going to be classroom teachers? How much are you going to do? How much is your school administration going to do? How much are teacher assistants going to be involved? You know, who all is going to be responsible for doing what needs to be done? And then your formative and summative. Now, your formative would be whatever you're using in the short term. Your summative could be the end of course, end of grade, which you won't have that information, but you would specify that that's what you're using, and that's where you will get that information. So that's the first prompt of task 4. Now, the second prompt of task 4 is just expanding on what you've actually got in the first part. You're going to share your action plan with your administration. You're going to schedule a meeting between your PLC and your administration, and you're going to talk about possible implementation. Now, your plan does not have to be implemented. But if your principal and the school improvement team or the administrative team decides that the plan is really worthwhile and they want to implement it, then of course you get to write that in your final part of this one, that it is being implemented, and you will have XYZ data by the end of this semester. But to be proficient on this, it doesn't have to be. To get more than proficient, you can implement parts of it and get started on it and write about that, and you will get a higher score. All right, the parts that are to be included under prompt 2 is building efficacy, strategies for sustained growth, what issues are you dealing with concerning diversity, what resources do you have that you are using, what do you still need, and how are you establishing this shared vision of learning. So those are the components to the second prompt. Now, to receive a proficient score, you have to demonstrate knowledge of the steps in developing an action plan. That's prompt 1. And you must demonstrate that knowledge and understanding related to systematic investigation of needs and solutions that are essential for the application of assigned technologies. So in other words, you've taken your need, you've identified how you're going to improve it, and then you've applied some type of online tool. Then you work with your PLC and you've completed the action plan as you've outlined, and you've talked with your school leadership team. So that's what you have to do to get a proficient score. To be accomplished, you have to have all of those things above, but you also implement the research-based strategies. So that is what is in task 4. Now, task 5 is your reflection on the competencies that you are working on for the APSL, which is this semester. This is the piece that most people do not pay attention to, and they don't get it right the first time. They try to make sure that they are putting all of the evidences. That goes in your competency folio. Dr. Lamb has stressed to us the tasks are where you are reflecting on how the various things that you've done through your internship, through the development of the APSL, and through the classwork has helped you become more competent in whichever one of the competencies you're working on. It is your reflection. It's like writing for the national boards instead of trying to produce something. The production and the produced items, they go in your competency folio. This is just your reflection and tying together the 3 components of the course. And the 3 components of the course are your internship, the work you're getting at your school with your principal or assistant principal or whoever they've assigned you to, the actual work on the APSL, and then the other materials that you're reading and that we're talking about and that we're dealing with in the class readings and the class assignments. So that's what you're to do. You're to write a narrative. You are to submit a minimum of 12 reflections. 8 of those are the ones that are required for this course, and I've put those up for you to find easily. Communication, change management, delegation, dialogue inquiry, judgment, systems thinking, technology, and visionary. Now you also are to choose 4 additional ones from the total list of 21. So it will be 12 that your narrative talks about. And I've already went over that it's a reflective analysis, course content, and in relationship to each of the competencies, your description of your clinical experiences and now how they have helped you become more competent. And so that is what task 5 is. A lot of people try to make it a whole lot harder than it is. It's not that hard. You just have to reflect on it. Now you can use what you've written here as a little introduction to your evidences, but you don't even have to do that, but you can. So then some additional points from Dr. Stedman about task 4. For the first prompt on task 4, it says that you are to use your narrative information to check the template for the graphic organizer. And it says you can do a PERT chart. Now, there is an example of a graphic organizer that is in his notes, and it basically tells you exactly what you've got to have. I believe it's in his notes anyway. If not, I will post it later tonight, but it's the information that's listed, it's just in chart form. And so you take the main points that you've written about and you put it in a chart so it's easy to see. You can also use the PERT chart if you choose, but you do not have to do the PERT chart. Use the headings that are given in the prompt. For building efficacy, the question that he asks is, what does the research say about building efficacy amongst the teaching staff for improving student achievement? So that's what you're looking for there. For strategies for sustained growth, what does the research say about moving forward to improve student achievement? For concerning diversity, what are the issues that you deal with in your school regarding EC, ESL, 504? What other groups do you have that you're dealing with? Maybe the economically disadvantaged, you know, what are the groups you're dealing with, and how are you going to take into account to help them to improve? This includes the issues that hinder your growth process for that group of students you're working with. And that goes in your plan of action. And then for resources, what are you going to need to accomplish your goals and objectives for your action plan? This is both human and money, fiscal resources. It's both. And one thing I want you all to realize is that when it says human resources and fiscal resources, all of you as teachers are paid. So indirectly, even if you think it's not going to cost you anything, it is, because you're being paid as a teacher, so your time is there. You don't have to list it in this one, but there will be one later on that you will need to list all of your resources. And that's where I ask you to think about what will the number of teachers, would their amount that they're putting into this help in what is actually costing to implement this. For establishing a shared vision of learning, what are your plans for getting everybody on board and moving in the same direction? And in your appendices, you should include a minimum of meeting agendas, minutes, a picture of yourself doing the presentation. You can put charts and graphs here, but if it actually asks for them in the actual task itself, include them there. So if you have any charts and graphs that you're using in your presentation to the school improvement team or the administrative team, you can list those here for task 4 and 5. But for task 3, if it asks for graphic organizers and that kind of stuff, put that in the task so it's easy to find. All right, I'm going to stop right there and ask if you all have any questions about the information I have just given you and the notes from Dr. Stedman. Anybody have any questions, or is it too much information right now and you need to think about it?
I have a question, Dr. Todd.
Okay.
If we're presenting this, but it's due Monday night, then we need to make sure we've presented before Monday night. My team meets on Tuesdays, so we met today.
Okay.
So I'm just curious about that meeting, or if I need to do it in a different way.
No, one of the things to realize is we are pushing you through this. You have more time to actually finalize and do this presentation. We're just trying to make sure you don't get behind. So if you need a week or so extra to do your presentation, because we're now headed into week 6. This is a 15-week course. So you've got several more weeks that you could actually take to finalize each one of these. Now we're putting a tentative due date early, but I don't mind, as long as you get your drafts in, I don't mind if the others come in later than the week that I post them that they're due, because I want your work to be quality and it to be complete rather than to be posted at the time that it says. Does that help, Amy?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. And that's a good question. If you were in the add-on course, then you would have to finish this now. But by you being in getting your master's degree, you have the whole semester and not just 8 weeks to finalize the first task. I mean, the first artifact. So you've got the whole semester, and I can give you a little more time to finalize it. But let's try to get them finished by around week 9, so that I can see the whole thing all together. And then that way Dr. Bullis can look at everything put together too. And we'll be able to say, please submit this to task stream, and we'll beat the rush if you think you can do that. If you need extra time, please talk with me. All right, any other questions? That's a real good one.
Dr. Todd, I just wanted to clarify something back on task 4, if that's okay.
Yes.
You said that all of those bullets should be a subheading. Is that correct?
Yes.
To make sure I'm understanding initially for prompt 1 and prompt 2.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And that way they'll be easy for your readers to find, and you will have addressed everything that's required. Any other questions? That's a good question. Anybody else? Okay. All right, if you think of anything, just let me know at a later time. I want us to go ahead and look and talk briefly about some of the readings that you're going to be doing, and also just I want you to think about where you work and what you know about the political structure and what causes some of the things to happen in your schools. Now, in Aldrich and Goldman, which you don't have to have had read yet because it's this week's reading, you're reading information about politics and education. And then you're also reviewing a chapter about demographics that we've already looked at. They talk about the need to respond to new types of jobs for Americans. Now, this was discussed in 2007 when it was revised, but it is still an issue today. So we have moved from the manufacturing age to more service industry, more computer jobs, maintenance jobs, and then we don't even know what jobs are going to be there that we're preparing our students to take. And so when you think about that, what kind of skills are our students going to need to have in order to get a job and make enough money that they can get out of poverty and hopefully stay away from the drug culture? So thinking about that, we don't even know exactly what jobs we're preparing them for. What are the kind of skills that you think we really need? There must have skills in order to make sure that our students are going to be successful, or at least have what they need to be successful.
I think they need problem solving and reasoning skills, because if we don't know what it is, they probably don't either. So they need to be able to take any information they're given and adapt it.
And those are 2 excellent ones. Others? All right, Megan, for some reason I can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
I think the academic rigor is something that we need to focus on. Our teachers need to be pushing them further than they pushed them before to make sure that the kiddos can step up to those challenges. And I also think their stamina and their perseverance, lengthier tasks, things that are very challenging for them, because in their futures, they're going to have to step outside of those comfort zones.
And that is a very important point too. What's basic to all of those skills before you even get to those things? What's one of the real basic skills that they've got to have? What's one of the first things you start teaching children in kindergarten and first grade? What subject area? Several of you have identified it as your need.
Reading.
Reading, yeah.
Reading is correct. And what else?
Then they have to have a foundation in their writing as well, just communication overall. And
math. They're going to have an understanding of math. Even though we can use calculators for everything, it's sad when you go to pay someone and they can't count back the change without the calculator in front of them or the cash register telling them exactly what they've got to do. And if you give them $5.05 and it's $3.05, so many of them are really confused. They don't realize all they've got to do is give you $2. So, I think we've got to start with basics and make sure they have a good handle on the reading, the writing, and the math. And then we need to expand to the things that you've mentioned. And then Sarah and Crystal say teamwork and collaboration, in exposing students to being adaptable and to being able to work together, and putting teams to complete jobs. And those are really important points. So I think that you've got a good idea of what kinds of things we're going to have to do for our students to be successful and to be able to make the kinds of money that they're going to need. Now, the sad thing, I don't know about you all, but as you drive around the area you live, how many of you are seeing signs that says workers needed, apply for an employment? Do you see that in your area? Almost everywhere I drive, I will find signs and see signs, workers needed, apply such and such. Jobs are out there, but a lot of the jobs are not high-paying jobs. But if you don't have a job and it will help you get to a better job, that's one of the things we've got to teach our students is some reasoning skills too. You don't start at the top. You usually start at the bottom and build your way up. And too many people think they need to start at the top, and they forget that there's building blocks, just like building blocks for reading and for math and for writing. You start at a lower level and then you build yourself up as you're able to do more and understand more. Well, the same is true of jobs. Once you decide what type of job you want to go to, then you're not going to start at the top, even if you have a college degree, unless you start your own business. And then you've got a lot of issues that you're having to deal with, including a beginning amount of money to finance your business. So you brought out some really important skills that they're going to need. So how much education do we need to prepare our students to get? And how do we prepare them for the level of education beyond high school? How much education do our students need, do you think? The trends have changed. Okay, now what are we saying there? Sarah, explain that to me. I can't hear you. If you'll unmute.
Well, now you can get a vocation,
Yes.
and that can pay just as well as a 4-year degree. When I believe when I went through school, when I graduated high school, it was, you know, you need to get a 4-year degree. We need to push everybody into college. Now the kids can get training in career centers, and they can be welders, linemen, different things like that, and those jobs can provide a really great a really great income for the kids too.
And I agree with you. Actually, I was in career and technical education, so it's not a surprise to me that we need to look at the skills, because I think we've always needed to do that. And depending on the schools, it depends on the guidance counselors a lot of times what they push. Um, we should always be trying to encourage students to do what they're interested in and what their abilities are. And if that happens to be something in skilled areas like welding or auto mechanics or auto body repair. I worked in a career and technical center for 13 years when I first started teaching. And so carpentry, you know, I'm just so used to that. I don't even think of that as something that is not being encouraged. But I think a lot of the guidance counselors did not encourage the kids who needed to be doing that. They encouraged them to go to college. And we're not saying they shouldn't go to college if that's what they want, but they can get a good job and a good education with going to community college and even taking advantages of classes at the high school level in the career and technical education areas. So you hit on one of the pieces that I think is really important. They're going to probably need beyond high school training, but that doesn't mean they have to go to a 4-year degree. It can be a 2-year, it can be a 1-year program at the community college in a particular area. So you're exactly on target in your thinking there. One of the things that I would encourage, as if you're working with seniors and high school students, there are so many of these for-profit private schools out there. And there was one in North Carolina that actually started a program for people who were, I think they were working on nursing maybe, and the state shut them down because they were not delivering what they were promising. The students were not getting the training. So I would encourage you, if you're working with the students, encourage them to go to something that has a reputation, that there's some data, even though I know we say data a lot, but there's some data that shows these schools are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, and encourage them to go to good schools that will give them the skills that they want. Sometimes they make things sound so good. We can give you a 2-year degree in 1 year. Well, what's missing? You know, unless they've got a proven record, I don't particularly think most of us want to spend our money on something we're not sure is going to work. So I would just encourage you to think about that. So how do we prepare them for education beyond high school? We've already mentioned several of the same things. It would be getting them to work in teams, letting them work collaboratively, and staying on task. Questioning each other, you know, that's one of the things that they've got to be able to ask questions and not get feelings hurt. That's one of the things that many students are not able to do very well. So those are all some of the things that at the high school level and the upper middle school that can be worked on. And I guess some of that's called soft skills that the students need, as well as the academic skills of the reading, writing, and math, and being able to comprehension of the reading material is one of the pieces that a lot of people have difficulty with. And I know I asked one of the one of you are working on math, and I asked you if the issue was that the students couldn't read and comprehend when they were taking the test and it had word problems, or was it because they don't know the basic skills of math? And see, sometimes when you look at test data, you've got to ask those kinds of questions. What's making them not do well? Is it a lack of knowledge, or is it that they're not comprehending what they're reading? Because a lot of the math tests that are given on the EOCs and EOGs, they are written problems. There's usually just one small portion of it that is computation, and then a lot of it is written problems, and the students have to figure out what you're asking. So following up with that, what are the biggest hurdles that we're facing in educating students who are in our schools today? What do you all see as some of the biggest hurdles? What's one of the biggest hurdles you're dealing with at your own school?
I'll tell you, at the high school level, I deal with a lot of apathy. Just students who they have a really hard time focusing and finding motivation, and they don't care if they're not passing, they don't care if they're not doing well, because they don't see that big picture. They don't see the impact that their education has on their future. They just don't care.
And I saw that too, and I just have never figured out how we have gotten to that point.
Mm-hmm.
If y'all have ideas, I'd love for you to tell me. But I see that, and I saw it even when I was working, and there seems to be a group of them that just really doesn't care. They don't care what they do. They don't care what people think, and they're just biding their time. And Crystal says the lack of funding and lack of parental involvement and discipline at home. And I think you've nailed a whole lot of the issues. The other thing that I would add to that, and I think I've already mentioned it, is the fact that parents don't encourage their children to push themselves. They would rather them have an A in a not as tough course as they would have a B+ in a really good course that's going to really prepare them for a college class. And I don't know how we get beyond that. I don't know how we've got to the level that parents think it's okay for their kids to just coast through the senior year, and then when college freshman year hits, bam, they're not ready for it. And I don't know how we've gotten there, and I don't know how to reverse that. But if any of you have ideas, I'm happy to listen to your ideas, because I think anything we can do to get them to wake up and to realize that it's okay to push yourself a little bit at the high school level, and you don't have to have a 4.0 average or a 5.0 average if you're on weighted grades. There are still things that you need to do, and you need to push yourself a little bit. One of the things that we did, and I'm sure a lot of schools do, is I think my son was on the 4-period day, so he took 8 classes in a year. And so by the time he got to be a senior, I think all he had to have was 2 classes. And I told him, I said, sorry, son, you're not one that's going to be able to sit around and not take advantage of what's offered you. So we had an agreement with the community college that they could take a certain number of courses. Now, we did it a little bit different from a lot of the schools, because we actually required 2 community college courses for 1 high school course. And the reason for that was because of the hours. Most of your community college courses at that time was only 45 hours a semester. Well, if you think about the length of time that students sit in a classroom at the high school level, and it's a 4-period day, it's a lot more than 45 hours in a semester that they're sitting in that class. So we required 2. Now, I don't know that they still do that, but doing that, most of the kids, if they'd really wanted to, could have gotten their freshman history out of the way. They could have gotten their freshman English out of the way. they could have gotten at least one or two other electives. And so without even pushing, we had that opportunity there. And a lot of the parents, when they realized that this would transfer to state-supported universities, and most of the private universities also accepted it, but they would sometimes put it as an elective unless it matched the title of their freshman and English and social studies course that they required. So, you know, we had that available, and when the parents realized that they could get that for only the cost of a book, and they were not going to have to pay all the college tuition, it became important to them. And so we had more and more students doing that. I don't know that they still are, but I certainly hope so, because we have a very strong community college that we partner with. And we've already talked a little bit about some of the things that we can do to prepare our students for success beyond the high school years. Now, the next question is, what role do each of you play when it comes to educational reform? Think about that. Think about your role. And what role are you going to be able to play when it comes to looking at educational reform? Do you question things at your school? Are you happy with everything that's going on there? You know, part of your role, and I suspect that the more you stay in your master's program, you'll gain more and more skills in asking questions about, well, why are we doing this? And most school administrators worth their salt are going to have a reason as to the why. I could usually, regardless of whether my teachers ask me or not, I would explain to them, this is what you identified as a need. This is why we're having this staff development. This is what I hope we will accomplish through this. So, you know, one of your roles is to ask questions, to look at the data, to figure out what's going on, to figure out what your strengths are. Every school has strengths and every teacher has strengths. Every school also has weaknesses, and teachers have weaknesses as well. So you need to figure out what those are. And then you use your influence in this world around where you live to help improve things. The next question to look at, and we're getting close to out of time, but what inequities exist in public education in your area? So when you think about the lack of funding that has been occurring for the last several years, where the funds keep being cut and the materials and supplies money basically are non-existent. What kind of inequities have those things produced in your area?
Folks are leaving public education and going for private schooling or going somewhere else. I see that at our school, and then just having to rely on more community involvement or donations or help or PTO or just more on the parents.
And you're correct. And then also, I think it's also, we're losing teachers that way too. I think unless we have a really good mentor program for some of our young teachers, they're not prepared to deal with the things that we're having to deal with. And we're losing them because they're still expecting things to go the way that it did when they were in college and they had a mentor they were working very closely with. So it's really important when there's a new teacher at your school that somebody, and it doesn't have to be the one that is assigned to be the mentor, but that someone steps in and sees what they can do to help one of these teachers. I don't think I've told you this example because we're still early in the semester, but we had I had a young teacher when I was a principal, And she had a lot on her. She was her first year teaching, and she was excellent. But she wanted everything so perfect, including her plan. She would spend hours and hours and hours each night completing her plans. And so then she had some personal issues. She got sick, and she had some personal issues to come up, and she just about panicked. And so we realized what was going on. And so I told her, I said, I want you to go home. I want you to get some rest, get over this illness that you've got, and then let's come back and let's see what we can do to take some tension off of you. So, you know, we met with her, and then she had a mentor, and I let the mentor know what I had noticed. And so they worked very closely together. Well, this young lady became one of the best teachers in the school system where I work. So sometimes we can solve some of the issues by providing help that's not even asked, because she was not going to ask us for help because she thought she should be able to do it. And that's what we get with some of our really strong achievers that go into education. And you all may have felt the same way. And if you did, I encourage you to go back and think about how you felt and see what you can do to help some of those new teachers. I think the lack of funding, that is one of the inequities. I think the fact you're having to depend on communities. Some schools have better parent support groups than others, so that just makes things more inequitable. I know I live in a rural area, and our local school asks us for donations for what would normally come out of instructional supplies and materials. And so we try to take up donations for them. My daughter-in-law works in one of the schools, and they usually ask for that. And so we try to donate to them as well. So it is an issue, and I keep hoping that somewhere along the way that our politicians will begin to see that if they have a strong public school and they provide for a strong public school, then they're going to get the business and industry that they're wanting. But it seems like when the idea is to cut, then we get on the chopping block. But so is every other state service that is available. The thing that bothers me is I don't understand how you can think that you can cut everything and still improve. I mean, it takes money to do what needs to be done with the children that we're getting. Very quickly, I want to go into one of the reading assignments you've got is on micropolitics. Now, there is this long article on micropolitics and what it is. There's also a video link under week 6 that talks about this article. And two very brief definitions of micropolitics. Blaze in 91 said it's the use of formal and informal power by individuals and groups to achieve their goals in organizations, both cooperatively and conflictive actions and processes. And then Lindell in 99 said, micropolitics in schools is the networking of individuals and groups within and surrounding schools who compete for scarce resources, even power. And so I want you to think about that. And so as you read those, you're going to get a better understanding, but I also want you to think about your community. Who are you competing with for resources? And who has the control regarding the funding for your schools? And how are politics interwoven into the running of the schools? So those are the things that I want you to think about as you're going into the next week. Do you have anything else that you would like to ask or that you want to comment on right now?
Very quickly, the peer discussions this week are on tasks 1 and 2. Is there a rubric? Are there specific items that we need to be discussing this week?
You're just in that when you're going over task 1 and 2, you are basically taking your peer review form and you're talking about the information that it asks for there for those 2 tasks. And that's the only one you have to do as a group and record. Okay? The others, you just do the forms. All right, that's a good question. Any other questions? And also, let me state here, if one group's turned theirs in and they did the right thing, they had established their norms, and some of their peer group members did not appear and meet with them. So they turned in, make sure you tell me the names of the people that did participate, just like they did. And then what we can do at the end is those who did not participate, they can form a group later and they can discuss those same tasks, even though it will not be in their group. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not holding you back. And when you establish a set of norms and people can't participate when they agree to them, then we're not punishing the whole group for part of the group. But I will work with those who can't meet it. Some of them were probably sick. I will work with you to get it made up. All right, anything else under other? All right, just some reminders. These are what's listed on week 6 that are to be done. Again, remember, I don't want your revisions until you've got approval from everybody and you've made all your revisions. Task 3, I made several comments. The one thing I noticed is the it calls for multiple graphic organizers, and most of you are putting in 1 or 2. That's 1 or 2. That's not multiple. So think about how you can incorporate multiple graphic organizers. So that's the one thing in 3 that I'm noticing. Do work on a draft of task 4, your peer reviews for task 3, and then your Zoom conference for task 1 and 2. And then I just wanted to point out, if you have group members behind, I'm not going to count that against you. And I will work with you regarding your revisions as well. So just make sure Dr. Bullis has approved them and don't hesitate to contact me. All right, any other questions or any comments before I end our session tonight? I'm going to stop the share. All right, anything, does anybody have a question that once I quit recording you want to ask? All right, I hope you will have a wonderful week. I know some of you are having fall break, and some of us will have it later. We will meet again next week, but the week after that is when I'm giving you fall break. So we will meet next week, but the week after that we will not meet. Okay? I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Goodbye.